Welcome to the Red Rose Film Club, a movie podcast that examines the wide world of cinema through a perpetually lefty pinko commie soy boy cuck Antifa super soldier filter, but more specifically, we love movies and want to create a podcast that would appeal to the disparate tastes of our liberal, leftist, socialist, communist, Marxist, and Leninist friends. The Red Rose Film Club is for leftists of all stripes who don't know what to talk about at parties other than movies and politics. My name is Craig. I work in public education and am passionate about social justice and workers' rights. My tastes range, but mostly exist on opposite ends of the highbrow, lowbrow spectrum. And I'm with...
Hey, I'm Hal. My name's Hal. I use she, they pronouns. I work in higher ed, and I run a food pantry. I care about food access, reproductive justice, building a robust social welfare state, and ending the state's domination through the criminal legal system. I am a staunch defender of Grease, too. And I like movies that make me laugh, and I like movies that make me suffer. So before we launch into talking about the movie that we're here to discuss today, what other pop culture are you getting into these days?
I have been into two big things. First off, which one do I want first? Oh, this one will be quicker. I've been playing like 2 years after its release, but I've been getting hella into Cyberpunk 2077, which is awesome. Have you ever played it?
I'm not a huge video game person. I had a brief career playing a lot of WoW. I love Diablo. I'm a Mac person, so Blizzard has always had my heart. But my husband, Mike, has played it, and I would make the aesthetic decisions, for the character, since there are so many modification options. Yeah,
it's great. There are so many modification options. Do you remember the most... Was it controversial? I don't know if it was. It was, you could pick the character's penis size when you are first modding your character. And there's 3 options. I think they're literally just small, medium, large.
Oh, chode wasn't
that might have been the small. I think I chose medium, stay humble. But yeah, that game's awesome. If anybody hasn't played it, it's cool. It's like takes place in 2077, and this like world or this city where corporations have completely taken over and taken control, and there is no local or federal government, and it's corporations run everything. And you like hacking is I sound like a grandpa, but like hacking is like
please explain hacking.
Like you can mod out your character, but like it's also the game exists in a world where people like modding themselves is commonplace. So like everyone has weird mods and does weird things, and it's just open world, and it's awesome and it's dope, and I love it.
Yeah, unfortunately, Angelina Jolie is not featured in it.
Was she supposed to be?
I'm making a hacker's joke.
Oh shit! I completely whiffed on it. I was like, wait, because it does have Keanu Reeves in it, and I was like, wait, were they supposed to have Angelina Jolie? But yeah,
not very yes and of you.
Yeah, I was trying so hard. I don't know if you can see my little hamster wheel turning. I was like, wait, what? Hold on.
Chug.
But the other thing that I've been watching, because it's great, and I was behind, but I caught up on the most recent season of What We Do in the Shadows.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, do you watch?
I have seen the first season, because I liked the movie, but I have a hard time with TV.
Yeah.
That's not trash reality TV that I can mainline without thinking about it.
Yeah, and What We Do in the Shadows has grown into itself, I feel like, where it was kind of at the beginning trying to distance itself while still being relevant to the movie, and now like the characters are getting to go in like really weird, bizarre places. With everyone in the show is great. Like everybody's sung the praises of Matt Berry over and over again, but like Colin Robinson in that show is the funniest character on TV.
Is that the energy
vampire?
The
energy vampire?
Yeah, he is great.
Yeah, so can I spoil this most recent season to say what's been going on?
I love it. I'm a full spoiler bitch.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So at the end, this is going to sound bizarre if you haven't caught up. So at the end of season 3, spoiler alerts, we find out that energy vampires die on their 100th birthdays, and Colin Robinson doesn't know that and is celebrating his 100th birthday. And at the end of his 100th birthday, he dies, and a baby Colin Robinson climbs out of his stomach. And the 4th season has been Matt Berry's character trying to raise the
Tending
rapidly
to
growing
the
baby Colin Robinson, who's still like, oh, sorry, I forgot the actor Mark Prush.
Yeah.
He still has his face even as a baby. So
That's
this
a good
season,
that's a good conceit. That
Yeah,
that
it-
almost motivates me to commit to watching 12 hours of something instead
Yeah.
of a 2-hour long movie.
Goddamn, it's so funny. Like, and this season has been great and like really sweet in weird ways, and I just love it. But yeah. Anyways, what have you been watching?
I'll say this. The movie I watched, the most recent movie I watched that I really loved, was The Baby of Mâcon. I don't know. It's like, a French town, so I assume that's how you pronounce
Yeah,
it.
it's Macon.
Macon. It's The Baby of Macon, Georgia.
The baby of Macon.
Which is a film that was directed by Peter Greenaway,
Oh, yeah.
who is one of my favorite directors of all time, and I had not seen it prior to viewing it. And when it's a fairly long movie, and I was like halfway through, and then Mike, my husband, came home in the middle of what makes the movie pretty controversial. There's an extended assault scene essentially in it. And he was like, "What the fuck are you watching? Why are you doing this?" But I liked it, and I really like Greenaway because my interest in film tends to have kind of two emotional extremes. Like I either like stuff that is really like nitty gritty, feels very real emotionally, and then I like something on the far opposite end of the spectrum that is like high formalism, where it's really not about lived in characters. Like there's no psychologizing where it feels like those are real people. Like instead it is like grandiose, grand narrative level archetypal filmmaking. So I think like something like a more recent film that I would think that I would say falls into this category would be like The Lighthouse.
Hell yeah.
Where it's like it's not about relating to
Right,
the
yeah.
figures at hand, right? It's speaking to like broader, maybe more philosophical notions than it is about like slice of life stuff. So I am a huge fan of Peter Greenaway. I think the film that maybe people have the most familiarity with is The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, Her Lover.
That's the one I
And Her
thought you were
Lover.
gonna say, and that's the only one I've seen of his.
Oh, what do you think about it?
Oh, I loved The Cook, the Thief. What the Cook, the Thief, His Wife,
Her
and Her
Lover.
Yeah, I love that movie. That movie's awesome. Helen Mirren is dope. Like, yeah, I love that movie. And A Zed and Two Knots has always been on my radar, but I never got around to it. I don't know. I feel like I was raised like in a weird movie bubble where like I loved movies, but everyone I knew was like, like Ghostbusters was like the pinnacle of cinema for like the movie crowd I grew up with. So it wasn't until later that like I branched out and found some of these weirdos that I love now.
Yeah, I feel that very much. I had how I like to say it is like I was raised to be a film watching lover.
Yeah.
We have a close family friend who worked for a major movie chain at a pretty high level for a long period of time, and my family had access when I was a kid to a pass that would allow us to go to this movie chain and get tickets up to 5 people as frequently as you wanted. The only restrictions were that the film could not be, the viewing could not be at 80% capacity or higher, and you couldn't get them in advance. So
you
I
had to
couldn't,
show up.
yes.
Oh,
So I
okay.
couldn't use it, for example, when my sister and I would go see the Harry Potter movies.
Yeah, because those were packed.
Right.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get like the midnight showing tickets, but we did see basically every movie that was ever in theaters.
That's awesome.
Because of it. And part of that approach is that like to me being in the theater is like a communion. Like it's the closest to kind of a religious experience that has persisted in my life. But part of that is that like I was very much until probably my mid 20s, though I had some exposure because I had some friends that were like artier than I was as a late teen. But a lot of the stuff that we watched was like I would consider myself kind of like an Oscars viewer, film buff. Like, I had know a lot of trivia about Oscars film, and we would just go see everything that was cycling through this movie theater. And a lot of that, like you're saying, similarly, the horror, especially for me, and a lot of the more art house stuff, if I wasn't exposed to it as a teen, like one of my friends torturing me at age 16, being like, let's watch Solo. The funny thing is, this last year, actually, I watched a lot of Pasolini movies other than Solo and was like, oh, this guy's a fucking genius. I'm obsessed with him.
Yeah.
Like a Catholic Marxist. A gay Catholic Marxist. I'm so fascinated by him. But like being exposed to these things. But as a teen, I was like, you know, a Wes Anderson girly. Like I was a twee gal. And the first time I saw The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover was in 2020 during lockdown.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then I just
recently.
like chugged. Yes. And then I just.
That was. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I tried to hide. I took my Apple Watch off so it would stop dinging, and I put it under my leg, and I think I activated Siri, and it just went, wow. And that was what we got from
Thank you so much, Siri.
So that was the first one you saw of his?
Yes, that was the first one I saw. Then I saw The Dropman's Contract, and that movie just blew my fucking mind in terms of like what is possible for filmmaking, like what it means for filmmaking to be about art, like not just about the movie making process like we see. I mean, like, you know, Robert Altman's The Player is such a great example of like that kind of peeling back.
Right.
It's deeply self-referential. It's about the movies, and it's like The Dropman's Contract is about like philosophical understandings of how film is involved in objectification. And I don't mean objectification like of women. I mean what does it mean to convert things into objects that are perceived, and our perspective on it, and the nature of reality construction. But like no one says any of those things, right? It's just communicated really beautifully. And I love that he was trained as a painter, and you can super see that in The Cook. Yes.
Yeah.
That's how he, like, that's his background.
Oh yeah, because I mean the one thing I remember from God, I screwed this up. The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover is that like a lot of the shots feel like he sets them up as almost like Renaissance style like paintings. Yeah, and he's really good at that. It's just a beautiful film.
Yeah, it's not, there is no naturalism, right? Like there is no like we are in this space and understanding like what it is to be a human. It's like this is a falsely constructed setting. You know, and his use of opera in that film, the aria, the young boy singing the aria is just like beautiful, and it's super fucking perverse. So it's just like my favorite shit. There is, we'll say last thing I'll say about Greenaway and related to his painterly approach. There is a pair of movies that he made. One is a documentary, and one is a film that are about Rembrandt's, a Rembrandt painting. The documentary is called J'accuse. And the film that he made is called The Night Watchers, where it's like it takes place in a Rembrandt painting. And then there's a documentary about it as well. So that's like next on my list.
Did he make those together?
They're 1 year apart. I want to say the narrative film came out first, like 2007 maybe, and then the Rembrandt's J'accuse, the documentary, came out after that. I think the narrative film is called The Night Watcher or Night Watching, something like that, because I think the painting is called The Night Watcher, or not, whichever one is the movie is, the painting is the opposite. So I'm a big fan of him, and if you're a fan of like really beautiful filmmaking, like his cinematographer Sacha Verchny is like has been involved in a lot of like just fucking beautiful filmmaking, and I just like I can't recommend him enough. But also like, you know, if you're someone who's like, I don't want to watch a 3-hour movie that like makes me think about the nature of you know, human existence and how it ties into the production of art, you're probably not gonna like it, you know. But if you're down for that,
hell yeah,
it's gonna be a good time.
Hell yeah, I gotta watch that, and I want to watch that movie and the documentary. I like when directors get like fixated and make multiple movies on a topic. I say directors. I really can only think of one, but I really like just the duo, which is Werner Herzog made two movies about that dude. One of Little Dieter Needs to Fly. Dieter Dingler. Do you know Dieter Dingler?
I have not seen that Herzog, but I was.
Have you seen Rescue Dawn?
I know I have not.
So those are the two movies he made about this guy who was like a German guy that came to America and always wanted to be a pilot and ended up in Vietnam and got shot down. And in Rescue Dawn, Christian Bale plays him. And Rescue Dawn is like, it's very much a Herzog, like man versus like his limits or whatever.
Classic.
Yeah. And then but I feel like Little Dieter Needs to Fly, which is the documentary he made years before, is really sweet in a not Herzog kind of way. Like it's about the dude himself who had this awful experience, but he's got a very he's just got a charisma to him that is that's magnetic, and like Herzog leans into that a little bit in the documentary, which is not, that's not normally his thing, to like be drawn to somebody who's actually likable or whatever.
But think about it kind of like one of my favorite authors and playwrights. I'm a big Tennessee Williams fan. And Tennessee Williams' approach to creation was very unique in that he would write poetry or short stories that he then kind of grouped together and would combine and make
cool.
into other short stories or novellas. And then from there, plays or sometimes screenplays or teleplays in a few instances would emerge from that. So when you read his like collection of work, you see these like winnowing threads where things just kind of come together. And I appreciate that in the same way that a visual artist might make sketches in preparation for a painting and then make a series of paintings. I think it's really beautiful when we see that emerge in other forms of art, especially it's so rare in something like filmmaking, which is so expensive to undertake and requires the leveraging of so like not just financial resources, but like so many people, right? Like these films, like hundreds of people are involved in there making that's just like a really special thing to be able to like play around with the same ideas in multiple manifestations. You know? So that's that.
So before we get into the main event here, I just want to talk about a few current events, specifically the midterms, that the red wave.
Woo.
We felt it. I mean, we live in Florida, so we did feel the red wave because Florida's in the stranglehold.
Yeah, I think that's it was a very interesting experience to know people that work in politics in Florida, and having been involved on a much lesser scale, but in some of those efforts, and like see everyone joyously celebrating on November 9th. And everyone in Florida is like, well, fuck. Like, basically everyone lost. And we lost, some of the stuff we talked about last time. We lost the Senate. Like, not that we had the Senate in the first place, but now they have a super majority. So I kind of think of it as like the Florida is like the great exception to this counter narrative of no, the red wave was defeated. Right. But I feel like every time Republicans win in Florida, there's this discussion of, I'm sure you've heard it, of like, there's people voting against their own interests. Everybody's voting against their own interests. And something that I think is really interesting about that, especially when non-Marxists say it, is it's a very like Marxist line, right? Sure. Because it assumes that people will act in alignment with their economic interests defined in very strict terms in regards to people's relationship to the means of production. And I am a Marxist, and I broadly agree, and sometimes specifically agree with the ideas embedded within that idea. But something that often comes up for me is that there's this article that I read when I was in graduate school that was written by two political sociologists who are at Notre Dame, named Roy McVey. and Juliana Sobolewski, that talked about the lasting impacts of occupational segregation, so the extent to which someone's workplace is racially and gender segregated on voting outcomes. And that this idea that someone's interests, their economic interests, are in violation, or that their voting is in violation of those economic interests, feels to account for the fact that oftentimes people's interests are contextual and situational. And we can think of like a blue collar worker broadly as having shared interests economically with, fellow workers. But if they live in a place that is highly segregated by race and gender, and they are, for example, a white man, it is in their economic interest most immediately to not vote in alignment. And so I think like we have to be very specific when we're talking about people's interests and how we understand them to be constructed, because people's interpretation of their interests and interpretation of the quote unquote threat that they face is just as important as and frankly more important in terms of electoral outcomes than an abstract notion of interest. Thank you for listening to me preach. Sorry.
No, that was beautifully said, because the only thing I have to add on it is just to clown on all the ding dongs that have emerged from this election. My girl Carrie Lake killing it.
Oh my god, I'm so glad she fucking lost.
I love her.
That
True
is
queen.
Yeah, I feel some kinship with people that live in Arizona, in terms of like Florida. I'm like, yeah, y'all are doing the same thing out west. What's up? So fuck them.
Except she lost.
I know.
Except,
yes, not the same thing in terms of the electoral outcomes in this instance, but like oftentimes, right? Like,
I mean, she is a lunatic, and it is funny that she lost, but it does, like, this renewed like the election was fake thing does portend like clearly this is the blueprint that Trump laid out, and they're following it, and that's scary as hell, because she was a lunatic, so nobody's like, that's not going anywhere, but we're laying precedent for future lunatics to do the same thing.
Well, and speaking of like context and situational specific interests, I think it's very fascinating that because we're seeing this marching towards DeSantis and Trump potentially as being the great battle for the Republican nomination in 2024.
Which will be the most horrifying / funniest thing to ever happen on God's green earth.
Kill me. Like, fucking murder me in advance, please. But is that because their interests, their immediate interests or perceived immediate interests are in tension with each other, that DeSantis has not banged the gong of the elections were fake, like he won, so he can't do that. And the Republicans have consistently won in the state of Florida. But also he does not want to be perceived as advancing narratives that benefit Trump. So like, even though they are, theoretically like in the same party, not so theoretically, we know from Trump's administration, do have similar like motivations in terms of fucking over undocumented people, like whatever, lists like we could list 1,000 topics on which they converge in some way, but that he refuses to take that up because it would be a mark against like him benefiting from quote unquote democracy.
Who's having the hell of a time with the Trump versus DeSantis thing is Alex Jones on InfoWars.
Oh, talk about it.
It is so funny. Like, he is, for the listener, I have an unhealthy obsession with right-wing ding-dongs and follow them and listen to them all the time. So Alex Jones actually is not one that I listen to like regularly, except that I listen to a great podcast called Knowledge Fight, which is just two dudes, one who listens to Alex Jones all the time and then reports back to his buddy. So I get the down low on Alex Jones a lot. But Alex Jones is having a situation where he will not turn on Trump, obviously, but he's also hedging his bets if DeSantis gets in. So he's having these weird moments where he's like, Trump's the best, and then he'll play a DeSantis clip or something and be like, now I don't know where it's gonna be, but I like what he's saying too. So he's just having this weird thing where he knows there's a schism coming, and he's refusing to fully take one side or the other, and it is hilarious. He also lost $1 billion recently, so he's also dealing with that.
He's got to be prepared to monetize whatever he can monetize.
Yeah.
He's gonna jump on the
But
train.
it's been so funny to hear him be like, DeSantis sucks, but I still like him, and then also Trump sucks, but I still like him, because he doesn't know where the shoe will fall yet. Like it's just been hilarious. It's been great.
He's juggling with bags of shit that are on fire.
Yeah. Oh man, so many bags of shit. He is. Oh, God, he's the best. So let's move on to the movie and why we are recording this podcast and why I have a stupid joke on my face that was here. I put a black mark under my eye just to make Hal laugh when we got here. Which, if you haven't seen the movie, I guess will become more relevant later. But the movie we are talking about is Boots Riley's film Sorry to Bother You, starring Lakeith Stanfield and Tessa Thompson and Danny Glover and a lot of other great people we love, people who've never done anything wrong, people that we can say these are good human beings. Also, and Armie Hammer is also in the movie.
I was gonna say you gotta say Stephen Young before you.
Oh, yeah,
I love Stephen Young.
I know, but I got so excited. Like, I always forget Danny Glover's in this movie, and then I get so excited when he's there that I didn't. The rule of three, I had to come up with a third one, and Danny Glover got it over Stephen Young. But yeah.
Fair. Also, David Cross's voice,
Yeah,
Patton Oswalt.
And this was a piece of trivia that I looked up, but now I forgot who it was. It ends up not being trivia, but the guy who plays, we're going to get to it, but the guy who is Danny Glover's white voice. Mm-hmm. There was a rumor, now I can't remember who it was, but there was a rumor that it was someone weird. And then it turns out, no, it was just the audio engineer on Sorry to Bother You who recorded it. And now I can't remember, but for a second, I was shocked. All right, well, I'm never going to find it now. Don't know where I saw it, but
it's gone forever.
But yeah, Boots Riley. Boots Riley is dope. I love him. If you don't know Boots Riley, he is the kind of the driving force behind the 90s rap group The Coup, and he's kind of just kicked around the music scene. He goofed around with Tom Morello a little bit in the 2000s. I don't want to step on anybody's musical altars, but not the biggest rage Tom Morello guy. I don't know if that does anything. I'm sorry.
You're kicked out of the club.
Like, I get it. He is like technically proficient. I understand. I respect him. I just like Rage Against the Machine just was never my.
Do you not sometimes just wish to rage against the machine?
I mean, yeah, and I like they Bulls on Parade, and like I like the hits and all that, but they never connected to
oh,
me.
That's fair. I'm a big, as it relates to most music, a big like just the hits.
Okay.
Girly.
Yeah.
So like there are a lot of bands I listen to where I'm like, I'm not a true fan, but like, have I listened to Guerrilla Radio extremely loud in my car while driving on like Bradford Road probably 5 times in the last month? For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
And it's in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, so I've listened to it a bunch. My 12-year-old self doing a kickflip with Bob Burnquist and screaming Guerrilla Radio.
Lights out.
But yeah, what do you know about Boots Riley previous to Sorry to Bother You? Were you a Boots head?
Yeah, I mean, my husband has a much wider range of music taste than I do, so I'm pretty exposed to The Coup through him. And I had some knowledge of Boots Riley as like a community organizer, in Northern California, like the Oakland area specifically. But just the second that I heard this movie was coming out, because I'm a big, I read Deadline a lot. Like I follow industry media. I was like, oh my fucking God, give that to me. Like I know that he is going to destroy this concept. because that like blending of like funk and punk and having like the leftist roots, all those things just resonate really deeply with me. Like, I'm about it.
Yeah, and he does kill it. Sorry to Bother You is awesome. I love this movie. You love this movie, I presume?
I do love this movie. I would say it's in my top 10 favorite movies of all time.
Oh, wow. You do love this movie.
I do. I mean, I love what this movie is about. I love, like, I'm always down with art with a message, but also I just love fucking weird, like, magical realist
and surrealism, and and Lakeith Stanfield is such a good like everyman to kind of just stumble into like a surrealist nightmare. Like, I think that's what he's great in this movie. Like, I Lakeith Stanfield's awesome, but like he is just he's awesome in this movie. He's so good. And he is a great everyman. I think like in Get Out, he's also kind of his role is really small, but like super memorable, and he's just good at kind of capturing that late 20s, early 30s like angst of like purpose and vision in the world and not knowing what to do or who you're supposed to be or whatever. And especially in this movie.
Yeah, I would say there's like something like deeply existential about his performance, right? Where he just feels like a little unmoored, like a little detached from reality and from other people. I mean, there's a profound sense of like alienation, right? In a classic Marxist sense of like alienation from yourself, alienation from other workers, alienation from the product of your labor, alienation from the society that you're embedded in. And I agree, he is very good at depicting that in a way that feels like relatable but also kind of otherworldly. Like there's just something a little unhinged, you know, just then that's where the magical realism comes in. It's like you're the realism and then the spice.
Yeah. And I think Lakeith, no shade, like I love unhinged people, but I think Lakeith Stanfield might be a little unhinged himself. Like he's a wild dude.
He for sure is. There's some like homophobic shit that he said.
That is not where I was going. I didn't know that at all.
That's I mean, it's something that I think is maybe on the border of like, he likes to make these weird Instagram videos that are kind of like performance art.
Okay.
And it's kind of hard to tell precisely where he's coming from. I think he has a little bit of conspiratorial thinking maybe that he flirts with, but you know, to the listener, I'll be extremely transparent. I'm somebody that thinks Chinatown's a great movie and I fucking watch it multiple times a year. Like I am a person that but I don't feel like I'm separating the art from the artist, because I say fuck those people, and also I think multiple ideas can exist simultaneously. Yeah. And hey, I'm a Marxist. I believe in dialectics and contradictions and navigating them. And so that's kind of where I am on Lakeith Stanfield, is like, think he's a really great performer and artist, and like maybe there's some stuff going on there that is less than ideal. That's
a bummer. Yeah. And when I said he was unhinged, I just meant I thought it was in a fun way, because I just remember,
like, as an artiste.
Well, do you remember there was an award show? I can't remember what it was. I don't think it was as big as like the Emmys or whatever, but he crashed the stage. I think he just got drunk and was just having like a hell of a good time. But I remember Silicon Valley and Atlanta were up for an award, and Silicon Valley won. And somehow Lakeith Stanfield, this was before he kind of blew up and people knew who he was.
Critics' Choice Award.
There we go. Yeah, he walked up on the stage and he didn't do a Kanye where he was like, I should have won or whatever. He just accepted the award on behalf of Silicon Valley.
It's this Paste Magazine 2016 article by Cameron Wade says, with a straight face, Stanfield said, I want to thank everyone for honoring us in this way. We worked very hard on Silicon Valley, and here we are. Thank you. And frankly, I mean, as someone who watched Silicon Valley but feels like it was like a pretty deeply sexist show, and not to mention all the shit with TJ Miller, whatever. Like, it's pretty funny to me.
It is really funny.
Like, and like, to
also
punctuate.
In the middle of him giving the speech, the Silicon Valley guys walk up on stage. So there's these guys behind them that are kind of like, and then Lakeith Stanfield walks off, and the guy goes, I don't know who that was. And that's
rude.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, I don't think it was I think it was Atlanta's first season.
It was. I think this said 2016.
Yeah. So Lakeith Stanfield might not have been on everyone's radar at that point. I mean, maybe the guy who is involved with Silicon Valley might have known. But it was just funny that he got there first, and while he's giving the speech, the people who actually won are just stumbling up on stage. But yeah, he is great, and we want to dive into the movie?
Yes. Yeah, the only thing I would like to say is that I'm very excited. There was some reporting last year that Boots Riley had signed a production agreement with a company called Medias Ray, I believe, and that Deadline had reported in October of 2021 that he has a TV show coming out, a TV show coming out called, I don't know why I said it, well, it's because I'm drinking champagne, that's why I said it like that, called I'm a Virgo, which, bitch, yes, which is an absurdist coming-of-age story about a 12-foot tall black man living in Oakland, California. And I saw something else that said a couple of months ago, reported in 2022, that like pre-production is underway in that. So I really hope that isn't, the 80% or whatever of things that just like don't quite make it, and that he is able to continue to produce things, because I think he has a really special and unique vision that I'll say very briefly about magical realism. Magical realism in a literary space finds its ties to South America in the wake of many coups, rebellions, and revolutions that were happening. And it's I think there's something about magical realism that has, Isabel Allende, right, of Salvador Allende fame, is one of my favorite magical realist writers. And I think there's something about magical realism that gives voice to disenfranchised and oppressed people as a way of saying, we can find a magic that is bigger and grander than just speaking, that there is truth available in something that is actually grander than truth. And so I really hope that he can continue to explore his particular brand of magical realism in the future, because I think it's a powerful way of communicating leftist principles. And it's fucking cool, bro.
Yeah.
It's fucking cool.
Hell yeah.
It's fucking cool.
It is cool.
And I want to see it.
It is cool. And I also like magical realism in this sense that takes a while to reveal itself is also really fun. So
it sets up the realism.
Right. So sorry to bother you. Yes, we have our main character, played by Lakeith Stanfield, is Cassius Green, aka Cash Green, which is, 2 words for money in his name. So that sets
a little bit
up
of magical realism.
Yeah, right. So, Cash Green is kind of your everyman, elder millennial, kind of lost in a sea of meaningless nihilism, trying to figure out what he's supposed to be doing and unable to find a job. And the movie opens with a great scene of him bullshitting his way through a job interview in a very creative way, which I respect. He goes as far as what does he make? A plaque and a trophy.
It's a trophy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He has the plaque, which is a great reveal where he's holding the plaque first, and then the guy who plays the boss goes, and the trophy, and Lakeith Stanfield pulls the big old trophy out, which I love.
And again, the magical realism of of course he did not have the space to have that trophy on him. We didn't see it when he walked in, but then it just blooms.
Yeah, I love that. And he gets the job, even being found out as a liar in his interview, which I also love.
I have worked.
Yeah.
As
I thought you said I have words. And I was I'm sorry. Was it that controversial?
No, I was gonna say I have worked as a call center employee.
Dang.
In political polling.
Oh Lord.
For a Republican call firm.
Oh no.
It is the worst job I've ever worked in my life, and I quit because we were doing push polling around a small Texas race, like a I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like commissioner level, like county or city commission. It was very small.
Yeah.
And the call in question, the script was accusing the incumbent of supporting pedophiles because
Jesus
they had
Christ.
put forth an ordinance that would change like basically that public urination wouldn't be classified as a sex offender, that had to register and stuff. And the call was literally like, this person supports pedophile. Like, it was that explicit.
Jesus. Yeah.
And I called and I felt really bad about it. And then I had a call where the person said, like, that man is my neighbor and I know him and this is hurting his family.
Oh,
and I
geez.
literally quit on the spot, sacrificed the paycheck because you had to pick up your paychecks in person, which they did intentionally to incentivize people to come. This firm still exists in Tallahassee, by the way. And this was a time in my life where I was like technically homeless. I was separating from someone that was abusive towards me, and I was paying for the place that they were still living in. And I still gave up the money because it was like that awful. I could not make myself go back there. Which all of that sounds really bleak, but I just say like there's something about this movie. Obviously, I don't have the racialized experience, which is very essential to what's being communicated here. But I do think there is a message in this movie that's like it is important for workers to unite with each other. And I felt like my experience, my experience made me be like, ooh, this like tickles my brain a little. I'm feeling what this is putting down because it's awful. It sucks to have these people like walking behind you and telling you need to make more calls per hour and
stick to the script.
Yes.
Yeah. Man, I'm sorry. That sounds awful.
I mean, it was, but at this point in time, it was like 10 years ago. So now it's a funny story.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'll let you call it funny. I don't want to call it funny on your behalf. But so yes, we've got our main character Cash Green, and right after our job interview, we're introduced to his girlfriend Detroit, played by Tessa Thompson, who is a lovely and great in everything. And I would like to introduce a segment into this episode, the Detroit Earring Watch. She has great earrings in this show and this movie.
She does, and I own a pair of them because they sold them as...
Can I guess which one?
Yes.
Is it Murder, 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 Kill, Kill, Kill?
No.
Is it my favorite one? Well, we'll get to that.
Ooh, what's your...
It's just because it was a reference I knew.
All of them are text.
Yeah.
Because I wish the gold ones of the electric chair, I think are my favorite across the whole movie. But I have ones that say, tell Homeland Security, we are the bomb.
We are the bomb. Yeah.
Unfortunately, they're extremely heavy. And
I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
And like I'm someone that historically wears very big earrings. Like my ears can handle some shit. But they're very heavy. Also, the person who constructed them clearly was not a person that wears earrings because they need an additional O-ring on them.
Okay.
Because they're just the hook that goes in your ear and then one O-ring and then the thing. So it shifts sideways so you can't read it most of the time. And I keep telling myself, again, I bought that movie came out in 2018. I've owned them since then. I keep telling myself for the last 4 years, because I have jewelry stuff, I make earrings, like, I'm going to add another O-ring, and I never do. But they're...
You got to get that O-ring.
Yeah. Oh, I own them. I possess them. But yes, I love her earrings and her outfits.
Yes, they're all great. So our first Detroit earring watch are due... I was pausing to see if my terrible acronym did anything to you when I said Detroit Earring Watch. The Do.
The Do.
Is Murder, 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 Kill, Kill, Kill.
Wouldn't it be Dio?
Detroit Earring Watch.
Oh, Do.
What did I say?
No. You said Do,
okay.
But I was thinking D-O.
My bad.
Sorry. No,
Do.
It's not your bad. It's my bad.
As in the morning dew. So we've got Cash and Detroit, this couple that live in Cash's uncle's garage, played by Terry Crews, who, Terry Crews is, like, as long as he's been in the public eye, has been a bald man, and he's wearing a wig in this, and his wig makes him look like his wig is insane. His wig makes him look like a buff John. What's that guy's name? He plays the dad in Friday. Man. God damn it. What is this guy's name? John Witherspoon. The great John Witherspoon. Yeah, with a wig, he looks like weird buff John Witherspoon, which is all I could think about the whole time I was watching this movie.
I think there's some also, it's not quite like physical comedy, though it is a little because, Lakeith Stanfield gets up and like is kind of stumbling, trying to put on clothes while dealing with the door. But there are these moments of just kind of like a great absurd levity, where it's just like, obviously it's not totally unabridgedly funny because it is because of his experiences of poverty, right? Like if you aren't living in a garage, which is an experience exclusive to the poor, then you won't face this. But the total like silliness of it all is just really delightful.
Yeah, and it's a good way to kind of an absurdist way to begin the movie, kind of almost the first scene. So Lakeith Stanfield does get the job at this call center where he is calling and selling stuff. What is he selling? Why did I completely blank on what he's selling them?
They talk about like collections of books is the thing, but I think also it's like not, it's supposed to be kind of vague, because there is one, the call I think of in particular is he's like talking to an older woman whose husband has recently died.
Brutal.
And I want to say that what he references is like, you enjoyed this set of books. Like, here's this other set of books. I want to say it relates to birds or something.
Because she says, and that gag I love of him when he calls somebody, like the desk and the phone, like physically dropping into their space is great. And yes, he does say there's a few like funny gags of him dropping in and then being like, "Nah, we're not interested." And then the one with the old lady who's like, "My husband just died." And then there's a beat, and he's like, "Well, then this book number 6 would be great for you."
On grief. Yeah, exactly.
So good. Yeah. That moment is great, but brutal as well.
Oh yeah.
That's the
all right.
the end song.
Yeah.
Wait, is it in the beginning too?
I think so.
Okay, and I looked. I was like, "What is the name of this?" And I realized it's just all of the acronym of the chorus. Like the name of the song is like nonsense. It's like, "Oh yeah, ta ta ta," or something like that, and it's just the acronyms of the chorus. Yeah. So So while he's at the call center, he is struggling, I guess, not doing well, until he meets an elder gentleman of the call center played by Danny Glover, who, as previously mentioned, Danny Glover's awesome. I love Danny Glover, who gives him his secret, which is to use your white voice when you call. And Danny Glover shows him, and he performs. And that scene with them talking, I love. And Danny Glover has a line where he says, "It's not really a white voice. It's just what they think they should sound like," which I loved. I think that's great. And
again, your interests are constructed and situational.
Yeah.
And what you perceive them to be.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
and that's the line that gets Lakeith Stanfield, because at first he can't figure out the white voice, and that's the line that gets him like, "Oh yeah, I got you." And then he has a white voice by David Cross, and I love the whole gag of the voice. Not the gag, because it becomes, I feel like the white voice itself becomes a stronger element of the story, because something that I think is really interesting is how the kind of the funniness of him using the white voice fades as the movie goes. Like, it just becomes,
I think it becomes bleaker.
Yes, way bleaker. Yeah. I mean, it just represents, like, the more they use it, it just represents the more of like himself getting divorced from his identity or whatever. Yeah. Which, spoilers, but when we get to our conservative dumb reactions, great response to the white voice.
Armin White?
No.
Oh.
Unfortunately. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Also, I like hear that spoilers is spoiler for our own pod as opposed to spoilers for the movie, which are implicit,
Oh,
and I think that we just
pod
like, need
spoiler.
to
Pod
pod.
spoiler. Yeah, so we get a lot of action with him in the office setting, and we meet some of his office mates, most notably Squeeze, played by Steven Yeun, the greatest actor to come off The Walking Dead.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I love him. Also,
That said, I haven't seen a lot of his
very.
stuff. Yeah.
He's really hot.
He is. Yeah, he's a good
Have you seen
looking gentleman.
Minari?
No, and I haven't seen that. And there was another big one from the last couple of years that I hadn't seen, but I really wanted to, and I don't remember what it was.
Let's look it up. But Minari is worth watching. I'm not, as I kind of mentioned earlier in the pod, usually like kind of smaller independent films that are like slice of life is just not really my thing. But as someone that cares a lot about food, this idea of like an immigrant family using farming to like negotiate their status in the United States is very interesting. And also, again, he's really hot. So
I will agree.
It's just hot.
Burning is the other one that I want to see
Yes.
that I haven't seen his. But yeah, he's
I
been
didn't
great
realize
and
he was
stuff.
in
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Damn.
he's not the main guy.
Okay.
He's I haven't seen the movie, but he is not the protagonist. He is someone that is an outside element that I think is introduced later. But yeah, and other notable members of the call center are, well, first off, Kate Berlant is.
I
like,
love Kate Berlant.
She's the goat and everything. She's just a great. She's just great. Like she's hilarious. She's funny in everything. She's funny in this. Yeah, she's fantastic. And also, did you catch her name in the movie?
No, what is it?
I don't know. I can't remember if they ever say it out loud, but it's written on the board behind her when she's giving her.
That's true. She points it out. Yeah.
And her name's Diana Debauchery, which is great. I love that. She has just a great name. Yeah, and actually, Kate Berlant does a really good job of capturing this thing that, like, I feel most jobs have and we all hate, which is the, like, basically people think of a job as a job, but here we're a family, and she's the one that's kind of doing that whole BS speech and kind of that vibe throughout the movie, which I think really captures that kind of like angst of working meaningless job where they try to trick you into caring about it or whatever.
Yes, and I think it is particularly impactful because I think that narrative is like a little more challenging when you're in, I'll say, someone that's like works in public service and has worked in social services and nonprofit world and political world.
Sure, yeah, I'm
like,
saying that like from an approach of having worked retail and like state jobs.
Right.
And,
well,
like,
yeah, exactly. What I was going to say is like I think the really interesting thing about it is that narrative is like kind of omnipresent for for the proletariat. But like the extent to which it is like immediately
right
bald-facedly a lie
sure,
is different. And the lovely thing about the way Boots Riley sets it up is it's like so blatantly a lie because they're not even throwing a fucking pizza party, they can't even like scrounge together $40 from the company to like do the bullshit of like, look, we care about you because we're providing you a meal as opposed to like sustained benefits. So yeah, I agree. I love that, and it kind of just puts in really stark contrast like exactly what that means in that specific kind of work.
And Kate Berlant is the one who's the kind of the driving force of the we're a family here at this job or whatever. But yeah, so we get a good little chunk of like Cash's kind of a slice of life, like what it's like to live through him. We see a few of the ways he's just kind of scrounging, which I do want to point out. When I was 16, I did the windshield wiper thing, and I got in an accident.
Wait,
I feel
wait. You installed strings in your windshield? It
wasn't strings, it was fishing line. And okay, I feel the reason I got a little weird is because I feel like, am I admitting to a crime from 15 years ago?
Okay, I guarantee you. Okay. IANAL, which if you aren't familiar, means I am not a lawyer. But someone raised by a lawyer in law firms, has worked in law firms, etc. I guarantee you the statute of limitations.
Great. This is good. This is good to hear.
Extremely low on things
That's all I
related
need to
to
hear.
non-violent crimes in the state of Florida.
Yeah, this wasn't a big
know?
crime. So I did the windshield wiper thing. Mine wasn't out of being broke. Mine was more of I was 16 and I didn't want my parents to find out that my windshield wiper, like I had busted my car somehow. And I put, all I had was
parental
fishing line.
fear.
Yeah.
Also, real quick, champagne notice.
Ooh, I timed my little sound effect almost exactly. Perfect. But yeah, so like my car was, I had this Toyota Camry that was just a busted up piece of crap. And the windshield wipers broke probably because I was doing something stupid and I didn't want my parents to find out. So I put fishing line on either side. And it was real bad. Like it was fishing line. So it was like a pain to pull. So I was working a summer job and me and a few friends were going to get lunch and it was lightly drizzling. And I, unrelated to using fishing line for the windshield wipers, like I just got into this accident where it was a fender bender where like I hydroplaned.
Unrelated. Winking. I'm winking.
I got in this like
listeners.
fender bender where it wasn't a serious accident, but I was like, oh shit. Because like when the cops come, like they're gonna be like, why do you have fishing line on your windshield wipers? So I was just like, I gotta rip this off. So fishing line, I like wrap it around my hands and just pull it off. So now I get it off, but now the cops show up and I've got like bloody palms. And it wasn't like that big of a deal, and it was just a fender bender, so like nothing came of it. But yeah, it was some stupid teenager stuff.
I want to share what I'm about to say, because it relates to like the general experience of like not having money and driving a car and also rain and also movies, but when I was a teenager I drove a car that did not have air conditioning in it.
Oh yeah.
And it was a black leather interior, black exterior. It was brutal in South Florida. But if you don't know and have never lived in a humid place, if you're listening from outside of Florida, when it rains, you like have to have air conditioning in your car because your car will steam up otherwise. Right. So in order to prevent that from happening in a car without AC, you have to drive with the windows open. Mm-hmm. And so my friend Kate and I went to go see the film version of Hairspray.
Okay. The new one or the John Waters one?
Water.
The John Waters one.
I'm gonna put new in quotation marks because this is over 10. This is like 15 years ago.
New one?
Yes. Yes, exactly. The John Travolta one, shall we say? And we drove there and it was fine. We saw the movie, loved it, of course. I'll defend that shit to the death. And then we're driving back home and the way it started pouring rain, so we had to open the windows. And so what would happen is like half of you would be covered, the left half as the driver, the right half as the passenger, literally soaked. But the car was old but had really good stereo, so we were all able to listen on an iPod. She had downloaded the Hairspray soundtrack.
So it was just,
and so we were just like blasting the Hairspray.
Just Hello Cleveland.
Yes. Good morning.
Good morning.
Baltimore. Classic.
Hello Cleveland, our favorite song.
I think you just confused John Waters
with the Drew Carey.
And Drew Carey.
That is exactly what happened.
You know what? I'll give you a pass in this instance because Mimi and Divine.
Pretty close.
Yeah, pretty close. There's some beautiful queer gender bending femme harmony there that I respect.
I appreciate you giving me the benefit of the doubt, even though I did not even get it in the same state.
Hey, it's East Coast. It's East Coast generally. So sorry, we can move
on.
I
knew when I
just
said it that it was not gonna be Cleveland. So Cash is at this job for a while when he learns about the status of the power callers, these kind of mysterious
power callers,
these mysterious workers, I guess, as he perceives it, who work on a they're revealed later to be. I guess it's the next level. I guess,
which we might call the petit bourgeois.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Which
Yes.
is he is achieving this, which I think it gets into later really well. The idea that like there's always, unless you are the top dog, there's always going to be another level, and there's always going to be like you're never going to actually make it, dude. Like that's a dream you got to let go of. Like that's how they keep you in the stranglehold, is the promise that this too will be you one day, or whatever.
While simultaneously presenting an opportunity to fuck over your brethren.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so we learn of this status of the power caller, of the best telemarketers that get this kind of elevated status and pay and all that. And then it stays on the back burner for a little bit. We get introduced to the idea because in the meantime, at our call center, what's the name of the call center? Now I can't remember. I know the it's Worry Free is the name of the company that they are like that they work for. But the call center has an equally like funny nonsense name that just sounds like any old place. God, I'm the loudest typer.
I can't find it.
Well, crap. I thought that was gonna be an easy find.
Yeah.
Anyway, well, he works at some call center that has a name. And this is our next due sighting, a Detroit earring watch. These are the glittery penises that she wears in the office.
Icon.
I feel like I got most of them in my notes, but please let me know if I missed one. And this is where Steven Yeun proves to be awesome because he has the great. This is the scene where he gives the great like rabble-rousing speech to all the workers, which is awesome.
I think this also is something that's I really liked about Sorry to Bother You, and that makes it very extremely clear to me that Boots Riley has authentic experience as a community organizer. Is like, if you've ever been in an organizing situation, if you've ever been in a protest where you're not just like a random person who walked by, but like you're involved in it, like it really captures that of like, okay, we're gonna go right now. Like
Yeah.
that like kind of burst of energy that you're trying to channel into like
immediacy
nerves
of it.
Yeah. Like it just captures that feeling in a like very raw way that doesn't feel like overly rehearsed, and I can just tell that the person who wrote that has been there, because I have been there and it felt the same.
Yeah, and Steven Yeun feels like maybe the closest avatar for Boots Riley in the film, like maybe the maybe a little bit of Boots Riley's like personal voice coming out in the character. And while this is happening, where Steven Yeun is trying to kind of protest against the call center, Cash meets Mr. What do we call him? Mr. Blank? Mr. Bleep?
I think like I believe, I might be wrong about this, but I believe the way he's credited is like the man with no name.
Okay, the man with no name.
Which is very like Western, right?
Yeah, I do like that a lot. It's played by Omari Hardwick, who for the movie's purpose, whenever they do say his name in the movie, except that they bleep it out, so it's just Mr. something. And this is the one that is his white voice is by Patton Oswalt. And I really like the scene where he first sees the man with no name, and it does that like he's coming off the elevator from the higher level where the power callers are, and it does that like Spike Lee dolly shot, like zoom in, zoom out, coming and going at the same time thing on like Lakeith Stanfield, like that magnetic attraction to whatever this guy is. Also, the dude that plays him, the Omari Hardwick, has just a great look in this movie, like a bowler hat and the chops that go right into the stash. He's just a great kind of a menacing figure in the movie.
Agreed. It's a very distinctive look.
So Cash we kind of get introduced to this internal struggle that he has, where Steven Yeun is kind of organizing this call center, and he does, Cash has this kind of loyalty to his girlfriend who's now working there, and his friend and Steven Yeun, but also at the same time he feels that magnetic attraction towards the like status symbol of being a power caller. And they start organizing these protests outside of the building, And on the first day of the protests, I believe it's the first day, is the day that Lakeith Stanfield's character Cash is offered the status of power caller. So the first time you saw it, did you think he was going to take it? Was he a scab? Did you think he was going to be a scab from the go?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for like obviously from a film perspective, like narrative tension, like it has to exist. That
Yeah.
there is someone who is the like interloper, or like I don't know what the opposite of an interloper is, like someone that's inside that moves outside.
Right.
But I figured that was going to happen. I mean, I think the fact that it's him makes a lot of sense in terms of like the vulnerabilities of the proletariat, right? Like
Sure.
he is someone that we have seen set up, like again, great writing, Boots. See set up as experiencing the indignities of poverty and like, you know, he's just like, all he wants to do is fuck his girlfriend, and the like his girlfriend also, who wishes to participate in the fucking, but they can't because this garage keeps opening.
Yeah.
So it makes sense, especially because he doesn't have other commitments, which is like he's cast in contrast to Tessa Thompson, who has those same experiences, but has like these artistic commitments. Like she can understand her experience via her artistic production, and he doesn't have that.
Yeah, and she's kind of more like confident in who she is and like what she wants. Like there's a great line at the beginning where I think it's literally one of those first scenes where they're in bed together, and Cash says, like, he's just kind of pondering, and he says, "When I die, will I have done anything?" And she says, "Well, when I die, I don't remember the line exactly, but when I die, I just want to be surrounded by the people that I love," which I think is like kind of sets up that great contrast between the two of them that plays out. And another thing that I think this movie does really well is the idea of like, yeah, it doesn't make you a bad person to work at an Amazon warehouse or whatever, like no ethical consumption under capitalism or whatever the reverse with that phrase would be for like working or whatever. But I do feel like this movie is toying with the line of like, how far up the ladder do you rise before you become complicit in it?
Yes. And I love that, because I do think, I mean, one, I think it's like generally relevant, but I think that is something that's really relevant for millennials, especially because like we're no longer 18 years old.
Yeah.
And I've seen friends wrestle with this
Mm-hmm.
of like, and I've seen friends wrestle with it and go, I'm going to keep making the money. And I've seen friends wrestle with it and quit and struggle to find other jobs.
Yeah.
And so that resonates with me a lot, of this like reflection of like, where's the point in time where you can go, oh, well, there's, you know, you got to sell your labor in order to make a living, versus like, okay, bro, but like you don't need to do it and work for Blackwater or Halliburton or whatever they're called now. I don't even know.
Yeah.
I can't remember. So I think that is really trenchant. For especially just like a very particular, like us who are kind of in this like in between age where like we're not at the beginning of our career, but we're not like long standing place. Right. Yeah.
So yeah, Cash does take the job as a power caller, which gives him access to the higher levels, which all of the gags of like how hard it is to enter the rooms are really funny. Like Kate Berlant entering the like 200-digit code into the keypad on the elevator is really funny. Also the elevator voice. Did you see who that was? Did you look it up?
No,
you know?
who is it?
The elevator voice that says like she has a great line. I wrote it down in my notes because I thought it was so funny. Is the one that's like
it's talking about like his dick, right?
Yeah, that one. Yeah. It's the same speech, but like basically every time they get on the elevator, this like computerized voice is just there to kind of like.
It's like, have you come?
Yeah. It's just to kind of
Are
like.
you ready?
Make them feel good, but it is Rosario Dawson.
What?
And the line that makes me laugh every time is she says, she says, I'm a computer, but I wish I had hands to caress your muscular brain. Which is a great line, and she does a great line reading in it.
Oh my God.
But yeah, and so he gets this higher status and eventually moves up to this job and moves into a new apartment. And I love that one, like the visual effect of his furniture, like physically breaking and becoming like better furniture is really cool.
That's a moment that when I saw this film in the theaters, what I tweeted was like, to me this is like if Michel Gondry met Matawan.
Okay.
Which is a film about a labor uprising. That's not
Yeah,
exactly
yeah.
accurate, but like I mean, it's like when the National Guard came in and was and Pinkertons were like shooting fucking labor union people. And I feel like that's a moment that felt very Gondry, right? Like that's on the very Gondry side. Of course, there is literal Michel Gondry participation, which we'll talk about later.
Yes. And
of course, but
the Michel Gondry fake name, if you caught it, did you catch it when we get to it?
I don't think so.
This is a pod spoiler, but it's Michel Dongry on the TV
perfect.
when they say
yeah, perfect.
But yeah, so he Cash gets this this job promotion, which kind of changes his living situation a little bit. Now he goes from living in Terry Crews's garage to kind of a swanky.
Do you notice how white that apartment is?
Yeah, it's like very austere, and which I think is like because the garage had like soul and had like a personality, and then it's like
it's just it's a very rich people thing. As someone who watches a decent amount of Real Housewives, my best friend Jesse and I are like constantly while watching this show, like, why do you all have such horrible taste? Why is everything white? Like, you're gonna fucking spill a glass of Pinot Noir and ruin everything.
Oh, that was before we started recording.
Yes,
Dang it. Never mind. That was a joke from before we were even recording. Yeah, that is weird. Have you ever seen internet lunatic Tim Pool's Weird House?
Thank God, no.
Okay, so he lives on a weird compound in West Virginia where I think he just pays his friends to live there and record podcasts.
So many things about what you just said, if Tim Pool wasn't involved, are like really delightful to me. Like living on a compound with my friends, check. Yeah. Several of the people I love most in the world are from West Virginia. And
Mountain Mama.
They are mountain mamas, and so several of the things you just described, I'm like, yes, but then Tim Pool's name is attached to it. Oh my God, Craig just almost dunked all the technology on the table. Make it horrible, right? It's like, oh, I'm floating over in this direction, lovely, and then it's just like sharp curve off a fucking mountain.
It is so bizarre. First off, so he lives in this huge like house, but it is the shittiest of like McMansions, and everything just looks like the house they lived on in like Arrested Development, where everything's
particle board.
Fake. Yeah,
everything's particle board. Yeah.
And it is just the weirdest. It is bizarre. It kind of reminded me of like, I feel like in the movie that's what Cash is like. This is how adults are. Is like we divorce our personality from like to become an adult self. I don't know. That just reminded me of Tim Pool pretending to be an adult man.
It's a simulacrum. Right? Like everything is a copy of a copy. I'm going to recycle a joke I made to a friend earlier this week when we were talking about particle board, actually, which is that it's like the chicken nugget goop. You know, chicken nugget goop is chicken reconstituted and like purified and pureed and like mashed into a different shape that doesn't resemble a chicken in any way. So like it is a copy of a copy of a copy such that the signifier no longer exists.
Yeah, pushed into
anymore.
dino form or whatever. Chicken nuggets.
I want to make it very clear. I'm thankful to capitalism for dino shape
for chicken
nuggets.
So Cash gets this status as a power caller, and then we learn what he's actually selling as a power caller, which is I was gonna let you do it. Literal slave labor. Like literally slave labor, which
people, and we also know that it's like some of it, at least that we hear when he's upstairs in that like very fancy lounge, is like for like weapons, like for drones.
Right. Yeah.
We see that's tied to cell phones. I think is something that's discussed as well.
Yeah. Because that's partially her little artistic performance at the end has like they're throwing all that shit at her or whatever. But yeah, so he's good at it too, which is kind of the conundrum he finds himself in, which I feel like I kind of relate to as well, because there's that scene where obviously Tessa Thompson's character Detroit is like, no, this is awful, what are you doing? And he's just like, I'm finally found something I'm good at, which is like it's sad. Like it's depressing. Like that's the saddest I feel like I felt for Cash in the movie, is that he's that desperate to be good and have meaning at something, and then the thing you're good at is this.
Well, I think like that's the curse of alienation, right? Is that like makes you so much more vulnerable to like, oh, this could be meaning. This could ascribe meaning to my life.
Yeah. If I do this, that'll be the thing.
Yeah. And it just like makes you so much easier to exploit.
Yeah.
When you don't have the ability to fully explore your human potential in a way that is unrestrained by like, I'm desperate to have my basic needs met.
Right. Yeah. I'm also realizing I forgot a Detroit earring watch, and it was my
Ooh,
favorite.
Detroit
of
earring
the
watch,
movie.
do.
This is the one that I love because it was a reference I knew. That's why I'm like, it was the one that is bury your rag deep in your face, or bury the rag deep in your face. It's the one where she is. I think she's wearing it when she's spinning the sign.
Right. What is the reference?
Oh, it's a good one. It's from a Bob Dylan song. It's The Lonesome Death of Hattie Carroll. It's from one of those Bob Dylan songs that's like very much, even for Bob Dylan, a story song where like it's not so much lyrics as much as it is like Bob Dylan kind of reading a Wikipedia page about an event. But it is Hattie Carroll was this woman who lived in Maryland in the 60s, and she was killed by this white guy named William Zatzinger. And it is, one of Bob Dylan's songs that is specifically referencing, this injustice and this death. And I really like the song, the refrain, bury the rag deep in your face. Basically the song is talking about this injustice that happened to Hattie Carroll. And the refrain in the chorus is he's basically talking to like libs who use kind of black pain and these experiences as like political tools or whatever. And he says in it, the chorus is slightly different than the earrings, because this chorus says, but you philosophize. This is kind of talking to like the libs who would want to like, I guess, politicize this event rather than speak to like humanity of Hattie Carroll. He says, but you philosophize, disgrace, and criticize all fears. Take the rag away from your face. Now ain't the time for tears. That's the chorus throughout the song. And then the very last verse is William Zatzinger, the guy that killed Hattie Carroll, got 6 months in prison for it. And the very last line is, okay, now's the time to bury your face in your rag, and now's the time for tears, because justice will never come, or whatever.
In the context of, thank you for sharing that. I did not know that. I will say I'm like not a huge, I don't have deep Bob Dylan knowledge.
Yeah, I'm not as much anymore, but I went through like a phase in college, because I feel like all white guys of my age do that. Where like,
that makes sense.
Yeah, and he had like the Hurricane song, which was similar, about the boxer that got wrongfully convicted and all that stuff.
Right, yeah. But I think that Detroit saying that, bury the rag deep in your face is like choke.
Yeah, for sure. It is. Yeah, and it is.
Choke,
I feel like that's part of the song as well. Is like there's a double entendre of like, kind of bury the rag in your face, as in like, I will do that to you because you are the one that stands in the way. Like your performative sympathy stands in the way of like actual justice or whatever. Which
aligns a lot with the way Detroit is struggling with Cash's response to her art, to their struggle that they're trying to share with Steve Young and the other workers, which is like, he feels this. I think it's a thing that a lot of people have faced while like navigating the threat between like what you're facing and other people being like, well, I want to be on your team but I can't because of XYZ, which is that like, I don't care, it's a fucking excuse, like choke. Like choke Hell on it. Like I have nothing else to give you because you're seeking me to seeking for me to comfort you in the face of me needing you to stand up.
Yeah. Yeah, so those were the earrings I got the most excited for because
That's awesome.
I'm dumb caveman who just I know the reference, so I got excited.
I don't think that's Dove Caveman at all. I'm really glad to know that.
Yeah.
That's something that I just kind of assumed it was like a reference to, just a gag, like a literal gag.
Yeah.
Not a gag. But
So then we get kind of maybe the turning point of the movie, which is Cash showing up to the job amidst these protests from the workers and having to be physically escorted in by cops. And one of the protesters yells, "Have a Coke, bitch," and hits him in the forehead with a can of Coke.
Such a good moment.
Which is a great moment. And that gives him the bandage on his head that he wears for pretty much the remainder of the movie. And that is, I do feel like, the moment where like Cash kind of crosses the point of no return, where he's like, I've been physically assaulted and it still is not the moment that's going to wake me up. And I am fully in the thralls of worry-free and like the promise of like being one of the elites one day or whatever. And that's the point where we meet maybe our greatest living actor and humanitarian, Armie Hammer. You gave me a weird look. Did something happen?
Who can say?
I haven't been on the internet since 2016. Did Armie Hammer do something?
There's rumors he's working at a resort.
Wait, that's true?
I've seen pictures. Honestly, I haven't investigated like aggressively, but there were pictures, I want to say over the summer, of him like what's it called when you take someone's car?
Carjacking.
Ballet.
Our audio just went out.
I suppose.
You know what? Our audio didn't go out. Your laugh
killed it.
Came through as feedback. As microphone.
Sure, I squealed. Sorry. I believe it was a picture of him working valet.
Okay.
Which is like in the context of, and someone's gonna fucking message me on Facebook and be like, "It wasn't valet, Haley. It was this other thing."
He is
whatever. But he was like, it's something of that nature, and kind of a similar level.
Yeah.
And in our skilled versus unskilled, which is bullshit dichotomy, all labor is skilled. Conception, and I think it's just like that wonderful distillation of like, bitch, you are always 1 second. I was going to say one fucked up decision, but in his case,
a lot.
1,000 fucked up decisions, probably more than that, honestly, of other people perceiving your decisions as fucked up away from being on the fucking precipice. And that motherfucker is from money. Money.
Have you seen that House of Hammer documentary?
Like the Hammer Museum in LA. Like, do you know how much money you have to like have a giant fine art museum that you funded? Like, you gotta have money.
Yeah.
Centuries of money.
And all the men in that family are monsters. There's a documentary that came out on like Showtime or something. It's really sensational. I don't even know if I would say it's that good, but it does shed some light on it a little bit. It's called House of Hammer, and it's just basically like, it's about Armie Hammer. If anybody doesn't know, Armie Hammer's a abuser and a sex creep and into cannibalism.
Yeah, I mean,
among other things, I guess.
What I would say is that he's a man that fashioned himself as a dom, and used that as an excuse to sexually exploit women.
Yeah, for sure.
And I mean, I say this like as a gossip monger, like as someone that has followed celebrity gossip really aggressively for like almost 20 years of my life. He's just a fucking piece of shit.
Big
that allegedly that no one's gonna come after us legally. We're very tiny, but you know, hashtag
Kennedy
like
song in the intro, and nobody's come after us for that. So
that there's something about like his trajectory in his life that feels like direct. I don't even want to say like penance, but just like a payback. Maybe.
Yeah.
For like the violation that he has strewn.
Yeah.
in his wake.
Yep, which makes his role in this movie all the more ironic.
Fucked up.
Yeah, and I hate to be the one to report this. He is funny in this movie. he is funny in this movie.
He's a fine actor. I mean, right? Like that's the whole thing. Again, like Roman Polanski raped a 13-year-old.
Right. Yeah. And I forgot to mention,
he made one of the best movies
Chinatown is
ever made.
Like also one of my favorites.
Like
and
it's so good.
Yeah, it's hard to grapple with. Yeah, that. But yeah, he is good in this as Steve Lift, the guy that owns the CEO of Worry Free, this company that I guess it's just a stand-in for any Google, Amazon,
Tesla, I would say.
The
bitch is practiced.
Yes.
You know, I think that's
diversified in his business practices for sure.
I meant that is true, but I also meant that Armie Hammer is practiced in being a piece of shit in a very specific way that's relevant to this movie.
This was real easy method acting for him. He just sank into the role. Yeah, so we meet him at kind of a party, and he's kind of this notorious playboy CEO type, which also very funny, which on repeating watches I pick up on. The first time we see him, he is holding a riding crop at the party, which I thought, I was like, all right, that's good. And there's another one that I did not pick up the first time I saw it, and every time I see it later, it's not a spoiler or anything. When he has, we'll talk about it in a little bit, when him and Lakeith Stanfield have their one-on-one, he's munching on an apple and kind of tossing it around. So I like just those, like the little foreshadowing there.
And also, again, it's foreshadowing for sure, but I also think it's like magical realism of like for sure. That like the boundary between what is like fucked up and real is very thin. Yeah. The veil is permeated.
And Armie Hammer has a great line reading when he says him and Lakeith Stanfield are just kind of bullshitting, and Lakeith Stanfield calls him Mr. Lift, and he goes, "Oh, don't call me Mr. Lift." And Lakeith Stanfield goes, "Oh, sorry, Steve." And he goes, "I never said call me Steve," which is a funny line.
It's never good enough. You're never good enough.
Right. And that like they have this kind of like at the party they have kind of a moment where they get to talk to each other. And then we have what is possibly the most uncomfortable scene in the whole movie for me, which is all the like people at Worry Free at this party tokenizing cash and like
where he's standing on the stairs.
Yeah, but even before that, it's like they have him in a room where like literally everyone else is sitting and Armie Hammer is like holding court. I even wrote some of them down because it's so awful. Where he's like trying to sound cool in front of like a room full of white people, and a black dude walks in and he says like, "You ever had to bust a cap in someone?" And then he's like, "I want to hear about that Oakland gangster shit," and all that. Where it's just like, oh God, it's just so
Stop.
Yeah, and so a little on me a bit. Growing up, I was raised in a like fundamentalist Baptist church, and so so a guy who ended up being one of my best like buds. I still he lives a world away, but I try to talk to him as much as I can. He a black guy just wandered into a fundamental we were like 15 at the time, but he lived nearby and wandered into a fundamentalist Baptist church and became like a part of our church, and me and him got really close. And being the only black dude in a Baptist church, that scene that happened right there, like I don't want to speak on behalf of his experience, but that was like constant at this place with like one black dude walks in and everyone just wants to put their like the tokenizing and the expectations on him, and it is just the most like I love that scene but also hate that scene, and it is yeah
I mean I think Boots Riley knows
right.
what he's talking about.
That feels very like a very lived in moment. And then it gets to the even more uncomfortable part where Armie Hammer says, "I know you can bust a rap," to him, and makes him rap in front of all these people, and which just devolves into Lakeith Stanfield just saying the N-word over and over again because he knows that's all that they want to hear him say. And
and then they're yelling it back. I also think like a really important part of that scene is the fact that, or part of important context for the scene is that immediately afterwards, basically, right? Like almost like within minutes, all these people are fucking each other.
Yeah.
And I think that like it's a very interesting way of talking about or like depicting the ways in which like there are these like libidinal flows, like these erotic ways in which racism is sexualized in like a pretty like unique way, because like there are maybe depictions of it historically of the ways in which like maybe sexual assault or sexual battery against Black women in particular, but also Black men, are racialized. But this idea that like the sexual like that it can be like this sexual fuel for white people between each other is like I think a very interesting take for him to present that makes a lot of sense and like is historically situated but is like kind of unique in its depiction.
Yeah, and I just love that sequence. Like I also hate it because I feel just the most uncomfortable. And it's great.
Like, you love and appreciate the artistic depiction,
right,
but like don't love the content.
Yeah. It also do you listen to Vince Staples?
Yeah.
He has a line in one of his songs where he says, I wrote this one down too because it made me think of it instantly, where he's talking about basically the song is it's Lift Me Up is the name of the song from his album Summertime '06, which was like kind of the one that made him pop off. But he has a song that's kind of it's about like lift me up. He's literally in the chorus like saying like how like he gets depressed and he needs pills. I think he says pills and potions lift me up or whatever. And kind of the verses are the things that are getting him down. And one of the things he says is, all these white folks chanting when I asked them where my N-words are at, which is like, yeah, that's kind of exactly the like vibe that this scene catches of like an audience of white people kind of tokenizing you to your face and just dehumanizing you in that way. It's brutal. That scene is brutal.
Well, and I think you and I, like, you know, some self-reflexivity here, like both as white people who love hip hop, we know that like most consumers of hip hop are white people.
Sure.
And so like even as people who are not yelling the N-word, reciting it in songs, like trying to be respectful feels trite, but like respectful and participate in a way that feels like genuine, there is still that piece of like capitalizing, even if it's like emotionally and via entertainment and not because we're profiting financially off of like Black pain, Black suffering. And I think that, you know, what Boots Riley is doing here is like much more like black and white version because of the frame in which he is speaking. Like he is engaged in, again, magical realism, absurdism, like this very like silly kind of exposed version of it. But I do want to just, you know, reflect on that for a moment, that like what he's showing is a very like simplified version, but there are complexities to it that like we should be thoughtful about as two white people.
So the party sequence and all that kind of leads us to the big moment of the film, which is Steve Lift, the Armie Hammer character, takes him to the upstairs office to discuss kind of the next level in his career, and Lakeith Stanfield does some cocaine organized in a spiral pattern, which I don't know, I just enjoyed that for some reason.
Same.
On a dish with a horse's face. Do horses have faces? Do we just call it a head? This is the great philosophical question.
Holy shit,
is it a
Craig!
Horse head or a horse face?
It's a head because it includes the neck.
Okay, you heard it here first.
Opinion. We gotta operationalize it correctly.
So Lakeith Stanfield asked to use the restroom, and he's told to go into the Jade door, but he goes in the wrong Jade door, and you hear someone calling for help.
Wait, real quick. I'm sorry. This is a diversion. No,
Okay.
You did it. But you said it's cocaine.
Oh,
and
yeah.
My thought is that for thematic reasons, it's probably Ketamine.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say like, well, we know what happens at the end. Yeah, and I was second time I almost destroyed my laptop doing that. Make sure we're still recording.
And you're drinking less than me.
We're great. We're doing great. Okay, ketamine. Okay, I got you. I thought you were gonna say like it was actually the horse thing, but yeah.
Well, no, I mean we know that it is that, but my point is
Right,
just
yeah,
like I mean I don't think it doesn't really matter because
yeah.
ketamine is a party drug, so is cocaine. Like both are associated with people who have money. Like that's not. It's not like the difference between crack cocaine and cocaine.
Yeah, he gives them some
cocaine.
bougie stuff to snort and
right.
have a good time or whatever.
Just like making a joke is like it's probably ketamine, right?
So
because of the hosses.
So he gets into the bathroom where he hears someone from behind the stall calling for help.
This is really sad, by the way. This is like the only part of the movie that I feel like is eliciting an emotion from me that does not have like a layer of like irony or like
humor and like where the humor kind of pervades the sadness, whereas this situation it does not. Yeah.
Right.
And it should because
it's absurd, so it still has a dark humor to it. But it's a different gloss on the absurdity that, like, the first time I saw this movie, I was like, oh, my God. Someone is, like, saying something sad. What's happening?
And do you know who that someone is?
No, who?
The horse, he shows up again at the end, is Forrest Whitaker.
What?
Yeah, it's Forrest Whitaker's voice in the stall. And,
see, this is, like, the benefit of Boots Riley being, like, having existed, like being an entity for a long time, is that cool he just like knows people who are like, hey, can you like please help me?
yeah. So the voice, Forrest Whitaker, is calling out for help, falls out of the stall, and it is a horseman. And we learn that Steve Lift and Worry Free have been dabbling and turning people into horse people to make them stronger, more efficient workers. And naturally, Cash is horrified by this. I mean, what do you think of the horse? We've talked about it a little bit, but yeah, the horse reveal scene is brutal. It's him pleading, "Help me! I'm in pain," and all this. And
I mean, I think that we're in kind of an interesting time historically, and that like this seems very silly when there are historical examples of under Fordism of models of your work owning the place where you live and the city where you live, and owning the town, not really city, the town where you live, and owning the grocery store that you shop at, and they give you coupons that instead of paying you and say, this is how many coupons you get to buy from the store that we own, that we get to dictate the price and the quantity and what's present in it. And I think that like it's a pretty, I don't want to say a close analogy, but it is a relevant analogy to that model of the relationship between the worker and their place of employment.
Yeah.
In the sense that like they will produce you into like you are structured into the worker that they want you to be.
Right, yeah, and kind of fully losing your identity. Like, we see the stages of losing your identity, which, like Mr. Blank literally has no name at that point, and then finally being completely stripped of your identity and turned into, like, not even human or whatever.
Right, and, like, it's cast as a joke in it, but the reason why it's effective is because it's true, and, like, obviously, there are comparisons to our own lives that we can see in terms of, you know, like, I am going to work on Wednesday morning before Thanksgiving to receive a delivery for my work because it's the only day that I can do that and make sure that students have access to frozen meat for 2 weeks after that date. And so I just have to do it. And if no one else is going to do it, and because I care about students, I'm going to do it. But like that's me giving up. I'm not going to get paid anymore. I'm salaried and I'm overtime exempt. I'm not going to get fucking paid any additional money for that. I'm just going to do it because I believe in the mission of what I'm doing. And then there are like other, again, scales of that, of like in the late 1800s, early 1900s of people living in environments where they lived in an apartment or a house or a duplex or like however we might conceive it, like a home that's owned by their employer, and they shop at a grocery store that's owned by their employer. Like I think it is like a lot more realistic than many people who watch the movie would think of, and it's like it's a metaphor, but what it is analogizing is like much more real than I
Yeah.
think like mainstream media was allowing it
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
or acknowledging it to be.
Okay, so before we move off the horse scene, I do want to say I love that they're practical and that they're like suits and all that. I love that part that it's not
same.
a CGI horseman. Yeah, so then Steve basically gives Cash a proposition where what he tells him is he wants him to be the Martin Luther King of the Equisapiens and kind of like basically mainstream the idea because I mean Steve knows that he can't tell the public that they're turning people into horse workers, so he wants Cash to kind of be the face of it so they can kind of release this on the world. And that's when we get that hilarious Michel Gondry directed weird ass initiation video, or excuse me, Michel Dongry is the one who directed that one. And this is finally kind of the point where Cash wakes up and decides that he's not going to fucks with Worry Free or Steve Lift anymore, and he blows the whistle in several big ways. First off, he releases the video of the horse saying, "Help me," and he starts going on like talk shows and things like that to kind of reveal the secret behind it all. Which the gag that I love is that he also, while all this has happened, the aforementioned "have a coke bitch" scene has become like a viral moment, and basically every show he goes on to, he has to kind of reconcile the fact that yes, I'm the "have a coke bitch" guy, which is a gag that I love. I also like that him and Tessa Thompson, like, they get fully broken up in the movie at one point, and then they kind of fool around, and I do like that she does not take him back when, like, they do set it up that, like...
I love that.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I really think that is, like, a powerful moment where she's like, oh, I'm here.
Yeah.
Like, well, fuck.
Yeah.
And also, like, that's what I'm getting out of this.
I'm glad you're making right choices now, but that doesn't change the previous situation. So yeah, and this is around the time where we get the aforementioned Detroit earring, tell Homeland Security we are the bomb. We did kind of gloss over her performance art moment, but what did you think of that? The kind of Marina Abramovich style of like letting the audience.
It's a little more Yoko Ono.
Okay, so there's
cut piece is a classic Yoko Ono piece where like someone pulled a gun on her, someone cut off her clothing, like.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I'm not saying Abernov had like
my Marina Abramovich was like, isn't she the lady that like the audience just messes with her when she does stuff sometimes?
So again, like a very classic piece of performance art is what's called cut piece by Yoko Ono, where there's like a table of items and like it had to be stopped. I just want the audience to know I'm reciting this without notes. I know this off the top of the dome.
I can vouch.
Cut piece, she, like, people were cutting her with thorns on a rose. A man pulled a gun on her. Like, pulled is a weird word because it was on the table, but like that's a whole point of cut piece to her. Is like, well, he pointed it at her. Also someone like cut clothing off of her. Like the whole point of cut piece was like, what will people do if given the unrestrained access to a woman's body, right?
Okay.
So I would say it's like a little more market of that piece. Marina like has work that involves audience engagement with her body, but it's like she's a little more interested, I would say, in an audience like emotional engagement with her in her performance work, and that the like threat of her body in performance art is almost always in the control of her, or was in the control of her ex-partner that she was with for a long time, like the I forget what it was called, Lover's Piece, where they would like hold like he would hold an arrow at her.
Okay.
That wasn't like the audience doing that. Like I think she was always a little more targeted.
Okay.
Whereas like Yoko was kind of like, let's see what people are willing to do.
I
but
guess
it's very like referential. There are other artists,
Okay.
Especially feminist performance artists that I would encourage folks to look up, like Carolee Scheinman and stuff that like Boots is obviously referencing. It's very tied in. I think the kind of fun thing about what he's doing is that it's like it is fine art and that it's referential, so we know that it's tied to things, so it kind of fits in that frame. But it's also kind of like silly, like people are like having people throw cell phones at them. Like it's it's a little over the top that pushes it into that magical realist realm.
Yeah, but after your explanation, that definitely sounds more like the Yoko Ono style. Have I ever told you that I saw Marina Abramovich? This will probably make
Talk
people
about it.
mad because I'm a dummy. I don't know about art. I'm not an art guy. So my wife and I, we went to New York City in 2010, which is where we got engaged. And all I remember is we went to the MoMA and I was like, okay, I don't know what this is. This weird, it was basically an art.
Is that the artist is present?
Yep.
Yeah.
Where basically you just went and looked at her, like,
yes.
So I remember like being there. We walked by it because we stood where she was. You could stand a level above, like a balcony, and we just watched it for a little bit. And it was just, I guess the concept was just she just made. I'm gonna butcher her entire purpose for doing this, but basically like you could just walk up and make extreme eye contact with her for as long as you wanted, and she just stood there and looked at you.
Yes.
Yeah. So I saw that and had no idea what it was. And I was like, okay, I get that was something. And then like 5 years later, there was a documentary on it. And I was like, hey, that's that lady that we saw. And then I realized, oh, she's very famous. And I'm a dummy for not having known who this was before this.
You're not a dummy. There's some really great writings on the ways in which like fine art is primarily a way for the ultra rich to preserve their funds in a different, right, like essentially a diversification, right, of their funds and their investment that simultaneously serves as cultural capital, because it presents a way for them to differentiate themselves from us by nature of their knowledge. So it's like it kind of serves this dual function. But I will say, as someone that like really loves art, and like I think that I truly believe that even if total equity was achieved, the proletariat weren't fucking charge of things, that people would need a way to express their relationship to living in a form that can't be confined. And because of that, I think that there are parts of fine art that like echo deeply.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so to wrap up the movie, after he kind of blows the whistle on everything, that is kind of the downfall of that kind of blows the gates open on Worry Free, and in like a moment that I really like, the Equisapiens escape and are the ones that help him. Help him in that last moment, and that's Forrest Whitaker again, who we learn his name. He's Demarius from East Oakland, which I like that he like, hey, I look like a horse, but I'm just a dude.
I'm just a dude, yeah.
And
that final moment, which I love.
The final moment, which one?
Like,
because there's a little post credit
of the horses on the screen.
At his house.
Yes.
Yeah. And then finally busting into his home. Yeah.
Just that moment of like, you can't, because I think like that's the thing, right? Is we have been taught, and it's something I wrestle with and have wrestled with in the context of protest movements, of like, we're being watched.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
be careful. We're being watched.
Yeah.
We have to be thoughtful. We're being watched. And, like, the thing about the Panopticon is that if you can fucking smash it in its fucking face, it doesn't matter if they're fucking watching you.
Right.
And so I think there's, like, a really beautiful, triumphant moment there of, like, them being like, film us, bitch! You know, like,
it doesn't
watch
matter
us.
anymore.
It does not
Yeah.
matter because you can't stop us when we act collectively.
Yeah.
With power behind us.
Yeah, it's great. So, anything you want to say on the movie before I get to our conservative reactions?
No, let's get to our conservative reactions.
All right,
I
so-
gotta pee.
Yeah.
No, you're
Okay.
good.
So, Armin White did not review this movie.
That's fucking bullshit,
I know.
Armin. This is me calling you out. Me calling you out by your name.
Come on, Armin, get on it. But someone from the National Review did, and I'm sorry to this person who I did not know before this, but your review was hilarious.
What's their name?
It's a very memorable name, Kyle Smith of the National Review.
Okay.
So a few gems. First off, he name drops being friends with Ross Douthat almost immediately.
That's so embarrassing. Can
That
you
you would name drop him,
can
yeah.
you imagine being like, oh, this baby bitch that can't like declare a uniform statement and stand behind it is my friend.
I think he said.
Like,
I think if
feel
I remember
ashamed,
in his
bitch.
review, he said that he saw that with him. They went together. Which, good lord, I don't want to be.
They
stuck
should both
near to
suffer. They should
that
both.
duo.
They should be converted into horses.
I would be okay with that.
But weak,
Yeah.
weak horses.
Yeah, weak with. Well, I was gonna say. They don't get the benefits. Also, he kept saying in his review, like, all the surreal parts of the movie, he kept saying, like, there somehow is this. And I was like, okay, this guy does not understand surrealism. Like, every outlandish turn in the movie that he says, well, somehow this happens. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of the point, buddy. So he describes Boots Riley in a very funny way that I want to read. He says, the film's writer-director, Boots Riley, is an avowed communist and hip-hop musician. In September of 2001, his group, The Coup, was due to release an album entitled Party Music, whose cover showed him and a bandmate blowing up the World Trade Center. Who is the child of a 1970s radical lawyer, and it's almost touching how out of touch he is. Like the movie where Brendan Fraser goes into a bomb shelter during the Cuban
Blast
Missile
from the
Crisis
past?
and doesn't come out until the Seinfeld era.
Amazing reference, sir. I
Yes.
applaud you for that
That
being your only fucking context for
that
this
paragraph
movie.
was such a ride, whereas like we have these hilarious like standard conservative like radical like these words that like we know what you're getting at, and then his big conclusion is a blast from the past reference, and then he has thoughts on the white voice, which he does not realize. Like we mentioned it before, how like the white voice kind of fades as a funny gag and just becomes like the real thing that they live in. He did not get that. He says, the white dudes talk like nerds on helium gag has been a staple for black comedians going back 30 years or more.
Sir, sometimes things are cliche because they refer to a truth
Right. Yeah.
that people want to articulate again and again.
Yeah. And like, I don't know. It's just like to have that be a gripe. It seems like you missed the point.
Yes. Yeah, very much.
But yeah, he says, and anyway, it gets beaten to death and trampled to atoms in this movie, which later turns around and makes a joke based on the opposite premise that in a white world, black people get called upon to flaunt cliched assumptions about their blackness for the delectation of the majority.
This man is too stupid to use the word delicatation
Yeah.
without having Googled it beforehand. So
that
we're
is
gonna-
a hallmark of his writing. Like all of his writing is like
At
he
least-
had a thesaurus on the desk.
I will say the thing about Armin White, I think as we talked about a little bit last time, is like I have a little bit of respect for the conservatives that like are operating from a consistent intellectual standpoint. Like if you're just like, I have to sound smart.
Yeah, Armin White's smart.
So-
He's just an asshole.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why I like reading him, because I prefer to mock smart assholes.
Right. Yeah.
Rather than stupid ones like this man who knows how to use a thesaurus but not his brain.
Kyle Smith. And this is the last one I'll read, which I just labeled as dumbest shit I've ever heard. He said, I have an idea for a far crazier satire than this supposedly bonkers but vaguely fusty prole power fable. My idea is about how a communist hip-hopper attracts the checkbook of a billionaire heiress, Megan Ellison, who enjoys blowing millions of dollars. He's shitting on Boots Riley because...
Well, Ellison is who owns Medias Ray.
Yes,
he's signed after that.
The point he's trying to make in this stupid
why
paragraph...
are rich people going to pay for this when
if
you're
you hate capitalism
them?
so much, why did you sign up on a production company for millionaires? Which is dumb.
It's also, in my opinion, a critique of the millionaire and not a critique of Boots Riley.
Yeah.
Like, why are you funding critiques of yourself that you would not agree with?
Yeah,
and it's a public relations move, which is fine. And, like, that is a robust critique, in my opinion.
Sure.
But, bitch, whose dick are you sucking? Who are you getting money from?
Right.
Who's paying your paycheck? Are you going to act as if hypocrisy is something, again, another funny word for hypocrisy, contradictions. Whose contradictions are you sucking, bro?
Right. Yeah. And also, like, it feels like, yes, I'm sure, like, Boots Riley is forced to operate in this capitalist thing. Well, what other option does he have to get a movie out there? It's just such a stupid critique in general of a movie, is to be like, well, the billionaire gave you some money for it or whatever.
Something we were talking about earlier, which I don't know if it was recorded or not, was that it's like it takes literally hundreds of people to make a movie, and it takes a fuck ton of money to make a movie. And I think is there some culture industry critique as a whole that exists? Sure. But that motherfucker doesn't genuinely care about that. He's claiming it as if naming hypocrisy is in and of itself a moral value.
Right.
And it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
So suck fuck, bro.
Yeah.
Suck fuck.
Yeah, he ends it basically. His hilarious idea of a Sorry to Bother You would be one that is the making of, that shows the hypocrisy, but he ends it with another funny reference to something.
Oh, are you paying caterers what they're deserved to be paid? Whoa.
So he ends his review by saying, the story of the making of Sorry to Bother You would be loony fun, and it would have the added virtue of reflecting what's actually going on among our cultural swells today, rather than belaboring ancient jokes about how every white guy sounds like young Sheldon being given a cosmic wedgie. This dude is crushing it with his references.
Sir, this is zany fun. That's not the exact, what was the language he used?
Loony fun.
This is loony fun.
That's the part that
and
I
your
didn't get,
inability to acknowledge it is because you're not a worker, because you don't care about workers.
Yeah, you work for the National Review.
Because you have a fucking stick up your ass called NRO.
Yeah, you never had a real job. I mean, if you...
Boop.
National Review. But anyways, yeah, I love this movie.
Same.
It's awesome. Anything else you want to add?
No, just I like hanging out with you and talking about movies.
Yeah, it was super fun. We'll do it again soon. Have a good one.
Woo!
Woo! Robot Boys.
Beautiful.